Hey everybody, it's Ryan back again with a special election interview here with Weston Newton. We're doing these interviews in part with the Greater Bluffton Chamber of Commerce just to get the word out on who our candidates are that you'll be voting for now up until November 4th. So Weston, thank you for joining me today, sir.
Ryan, delighted to be with you.
Thank you. So like I told you, we just start these interviews off with who are you? What do you do? How did you get here? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Ryan, obviously my name is Weston Newton. I was born and raised in South Carolina. I've been here in the Low Country since the mid 90s. My wife and I, Rose, have lived here for about 28 years. We have three children. My oldest works with Senator Tim Scott in Washington. My son, the middle child, William, and my daughter Eliza Rose are both at the university in Columbia. I'm a partner here in the law firm of Jones, Simpson, and Newton. Let's see, I've invested over 25 years of public service in Beaufort County. Of my adult life, I ran for county council in 1999, was elected in a contested race at that point in time, was then elected as chairman of county council in 2002 and reelected by the members of council every 2 years until I resigned as chairman, every 2 years until I resigned in 2012 to run for the House of Representatives. And as a South Carolina native, as somebody who watched the state from a lot of different perspectives. I grew up in Greenville. I lived in Columbia when I was in law school. I went to college in Virginia, Washington, and Lee, but law school in Columbia. I worked for the state Supreme Court right out of law school in Columbia, a state trial judge, then the chief federal judge in between Florence and Charleston for a 2-year stint. So I've lived all over the state of South Carolina. And had the benefit of seeing what 16 years of Greenville governors looks like, what having leadership in the Columbia area or in the Charleston area. I mean, what that looks like and what that means in terms of state investments coming back to those communities. Probably the inspiration for why I ran for office in 2012 for the House, why I'm running for reelection. It's simple. I want to make our community and our state a place where families can thrive, a place where we live freely in a prosperous, beautiful environment. And Ryan, where my children and your children and their children can come back and continue to enjoy the natural beauty and assets that we have here and work and raise their families.
No, I appreciate all that. That covered a lot. I want to break down a couple of things you said. The one thing I'm actually really curious about that you said, and I think only you could really cover it because of your extensive history. What, as somebody that's not a South Carolinian natively, what does a Greenville or a Charleston governor look like? Like, how does that change the way the states run?
Well, it's not necessarily the way the states run, but it's where the focus may be for economic development, for resources. And let me just give you some examples.
Yeah.
Economic development, look in Greenville, 16 years of Greenville governors, BMW, Michelin, Hitachi, all of the economic engine of this state for a number of years was all driven toward that Greenville area. Infrastructure was not the Greenville folks and the upstate folks were not wanting. By comparison, I'm chairman of county council. Sun City's being built, terrible accident at the new entrance to Sun City. We went to DOT and looked for $50,000 for a traffic light. They told us they didn't have it. At this very same time, DOT was putting in a beautification fountain at exit 108 at Jerry's truck stop, just up I-95, 100 miles. So at the very same time, we're trying to find money for a life-saving measure. We didn't have it budgeted in county council's budget. It had not been required otherwise to go in, but we had gotten to the point that intersection warranted a traffic light and it was needed for public safety. So DOT simply said, I'm sorry, we don't have it. And we got nothing. In the same era, 20 years ago, USCB, we went to Columbia and said, we've grown up. We want to be a 4-year degree granting institution. There are no other public colleges within a 2-hour drive of the citizens and residents of this part of South Carolina. The state said, no, I'm sorry. Because if you become 4-year, you're going to come back and try to have a real seat at the table of the allocation of monies for 4-year students. So no. It's in against that backdrop. Now, let me tell you, finish the story on USCB because it's particularly significant as we're celebrating right now the 20th anniversary.
Right.
We went back to the state, repackaged the deal, and said, County Council has created a tax increment financing district. We are going to put $40 million of investment in facilities that will become the state of South Carolina's in return for 4-year degree granting status. So we essentially made a deal that the state couldn't turn down. Okay. Look where we are today with the university. And let me just finish this line of what it looks like in having significant strength of a delegation or governors or leadership in other parts of the state. When we got that 4-year status, we had to commit we wouldn't ask for $1 more per pupil for a 5-year period. Okay. We were being funded when I was elected to the State House in 12 at 38 cents on the dollar that the other 4-year colleges were being funded per pupil.
Wow. So
today we're at 100%.
Okay.
We got the largest share. I mean, I can go on and on about what's happened, but I mean, the significance and difference is U.S. Highway 278, which was our lifeline to Hilton Head when I became chairman of county council, it wasn't on the state's 20-year needs list, despite the fact that our population had grown 50% from 2000 to 2000, from 90 to 2000, and another 48% from 2000 to 2010. It wasn't on any sort of list. And during that tenure, we went to Washington and sought and got money back. But the difference, quite frankly, to put the fine point on your question is, I come from the position that the taxpayer ought to keep more money in his pocket than the government ought to keep in theirs. But once that budget has been established and we know how much money there's in Columbia, our job, our responsibility, just as the other 170 members or 169 members of the General Assembly, is to fight to make sure that money comes back in state resources in your district. For more than 20 years, we've been left out of that conversation. Today, we are not only not left out of the conversation, we're the ones giving the strength of our delegation. We're the ones conducting the conversation. And that is, we find ourselves in a situation that, perhaps we have never been in. In fact, in 25, we have the chance to send back to Columbia a group of legislators that Beaufort County is becoming a force to be reckoned with. Tom Davis is chairman of Labor, Commerce, and Industry. Representative Bill Herb Kurzman is about to be chairman of House Labor, Commerce, and Industry. Shannon Erickson is chairman of Education and Public Works. And I'm honored to be chairman of the Judiciary Committee, in the House, where the lion's shares of legislation that becomes law comes through my committee. So when you look at that leadership role, I can't tell you another time in my life that there's been that many folks in those senior leadership positions concentrated in one area of the state. So by comparison, when you say 16 years of Greenville governors, or the speaker is from, or the president pro tem of the Senate, our concentration, our leadership positions now puts Beaufort up second to none, and Jasper County in this low country area than any other place in the state.
Wow, that's. I mean, I know I asked one question, but that was like a very well thought out answer. I appreciate that, because I'm glad I asked it, honestly, because I was like, oh, well, maybe there's different types of politics, but I get it now. There's a focus, and that area can grow if it has the right representation. So do you feel like, I mean, I know you said massive things have changed. Do you feel like anybody that you just mentioned would be running for governor in their next go round after this one?
I don't think, look, I don't ever want to speak for anybody else, right? I know I'm not. I believe in part-time politics. I believe that you ought to be a citizen legislature. I believe that I ought to be in Columbia only so much as necessary to get the job done and to fight for my constituents and to fight, quite frankly, on legislation that is meaningful and good for the state. Reduce the size and scope of government, get out of the way, let business and people do their own things, pass a budget, and come home. I am a firm believer that public service is just that. It is service to others. It is not about improving your own lot in life or your employer's lot in life. It's about representing the regular folks and being their voice. And quite frankly, then coming home and having to live and work within the parameters and the laws and the budgets and the decisions that you make. I often joke, they say one of the most expensive inventions that's ever been is air conditioning, because before that, people didn't stay in Washington. They rode their horse, they did their deal, and they went home as quick as they could. It's a full-time job at that level. It's a full-time job at governor. I'm not looking for that. I am looking for the privilege and opportunity to continue my service to the folks of the Low Country and District 120.
No, I appreciate that. Now, how do you feel, or what do you feel are the top priorities of our community in your representation of our counties?
Sure. There are a whole host of different items that we could talk about, but I will tell you that obviously the costs, what it costs to live here, and the economy, and quite frankly, what it takes. I will continue my efforts to cut taxes. We've cut income taxes almost $1 billion just in last year's budget. And we continue to try to find ways and to reduce the tax burden. It's good for economic development. It's good for families. When we started out, I told you that I thought people are better off with the money in their pockets than in government's pockets. And I firmly believe that. I'm going to continue to work to make government more transparent, more efficient, more accountable, continuing essentially my work to make government trustworthy. I'll continue fighting for our district to bring the level of the voice of my constituents up in Columbia, to fight and bring home our fair share and ensure that we always preserve, prioritize, and protect our natural environment. It's what makes this part of the state so special and so unique. And probably finally, I'll continue to prioritize, public safety. So essentially, the three issues. Look, let's talk about infrastructure challenges, and as one of those. That's part of government transparency, efficiency, accountability, and fighting for fair share. So all of those things, keeping people safe, lower taxes, lower regulatory burden, that's what drives prosperity for families, for small business, for the tourism industry, for the home building industry, Ryan, that you're in, quite frankly, for any. This is a challenging part of South Carolina for major economic development. Land's expensive, which has a cascading effect over everything. So small business really is the engine, and tourism and retirees and the military that drive our economy here. And, this morning I had the honor to join Senator Davis and some folks from county council and the mayors from Hilton Head and Bluffton. We opened a new satellite office for the Veterans Affairs in Bluffton.
Oh, wow.
Where's that at? It's on Bentonfield Road.
Bentonfield Road.
Yeah, it's where the old Public Works facility used to be. You turn down Ulmer, and then it's right there, Ryan, on Bentonfield. And the significance is, it's not the bricks and mortar, but what it represents is an outreach, a satellite office to reach out to the more than 25,000 veterans we have in Beaufort County that are so deeply woven into the fabric of this county, this culture, business leaders, church leaders, school, the whole gamut. And to reflect the commitment that we are continuing to do everything we can to serve those folks that served us.
Amen
So
to that.
I know
Yeah.
that's a long answer to your question, and it's got a lot of moving parts. But
Yeah.
you know, the issues facing our district. You know, look, it's the economy, and I think cutting taxes is always what's helpful. Transparency in government is something that has been the bedrock of my foundational principles since I got into public service. I'm the county channel that exists today was because I wanted the cameras to be in the committee rooms. I wanted every county council meeting to be on television. I did not want people to hear to say, we know those decisions are made in smoke-filled rooms out of sight.
Right.
And you know, I've continued that in Columbia. You know, one of the early pieces of legislation that I did was to rewrote the Freedom of Information Act to make it more stringent, to make it easier for citizens to get access to government documents at every level of government. And then knowing that I could not control what others did, but becoming chairman of oversight in the second year I was there, which was fairly unique in the House because we're not based on time, how long you've been there, but there's certainly a belief that some folks that have been there a while don't necessarily like an upstart becoming chairman of a committee, which I did. But I required from the start when the oversight committee to be on television, to be live streamed, or we weren't going to meet, both subcommittees and full committees. Again, people's business ought to be done in public, and it ought to be easy for folks to understand and see how their elected officials voted, what they said, what the discussion was. And my idea was, one, that I was doing what I fundamentally believed in, but two, I was going to be a role model for others. I've continued that same practice at chairman of judiciary, and I'm delighted to tell you that Shannon Erickson and her education and public works committee, 100% full live streamed in the last 2 years as well. And wow. There are others that are watching us and beginning to do the same thing. So, you know, I can never talk about the top issues facing my district or the state or government at any level that I'm not talking about transparency, to be able to hold people accountable, efficiencies in government, to reduce government spending and cut taxes, and then public safety. You know, if we don't have a safe place to live and work and play, we're not going to have prosperous anything.
For sure. I want to take your tax. Let's go taxes first real quick. Usually I save some viewer, listener, Facebook group questions to the end, but I think this fits here. The consensus of one girl, Sarah's question was, they came from Virginia. They felt like everything's more expensive here now. Her husband wants to go back. She loves it here. A lot of those conversations are happening right now. Everybody moved here because it was originally cheaper, and then all of a sudden, so many people moved here, everything's more expensive. How do you see a way? She wants to directly ask, do you see a way that we can remove state income tax? Let me just ask her question that way.
I would love to tell you, yes, I would love to see us get to the point that we could. But the fact of the matter is, we can continue to reduce the level of income taxes based on income and the workforce in South Carolina expanding. Completely doing away with personal income tax means something else has got to be increased, right? And is that property taxes? Well, look, you know, the Act 388 in 2017 that brought in the difference between primary residence and second homes, you know, as you well know, I mean, it has created lots of disparities and challenges. There are lots of, I wasn't in the legislature in 07 when Act 388 was passed. So I was not intimately in the middle of those discussions, but initially it was 2 pennies instead of 1 and do away with all property taxes for school operations. That didn't happen. And we ended up with 1. I do think that there as many things that are as exempt from sales tax in South Carolina, as we continue to look at the revenue forecasts and the workforce expands and there's more income coming into the state, that we can continue to roll back that marginal income tax rate. and we want to become more competitive than our neighbors. We want to reduce that as far as we possibly can. And we've done that, look, through conservative, budgeting. I mean, we have very low debt in South Carolina, low unemployment. Our economy is booming. And that creates some challenges that got to be dealt with. And we'll talk about those in a bit, whether it's infrastructure or energy generation. But the short answer is I would love to think we could get there. I don't think we'll ever get to the point that we can eliminate it completely unless we are replacing it with an increase in sales tax or less funding from the state to the local levels, and then they end up trying to raise property taxes. So, reducing one just to force the other ones to go up. We're trying to cut income taxes by capping spending, by taking advantage of the growth of more people that are coming here, and by conservative budget.
So the overall idea, correct me if I'm wrong, would be as more people come, we could lower that tax rate, and that would still keep it where it needs to be?
Or as people earn more money.
Okay.
As individuals and businesses are more prosperous, as there's more economic development in South Carolina, that more income, we don't need government spending to go up with that. We need, as the income comes in, and we're trying to keep a lid on government spending and become more efficient in what we're doing, continuous to do at the government level, and to some degree reducing the size and scope of government, that we're taking advantage of that additional revenue that's coming in by lowering the tax rate.
Okay, so now let's use this clip as an ad to get people to move here. Ready? Next question. How do we get more workforce folks here? So I talked to Tom Davis. He mentioned how it used to work back in the day before I lived here, and folks would come from all the different counties and they would come here to work. Now they have favorable opportunities where they live as an owner of two businesses, trying to find anybody in the home industry. But I know all of these great small businesses in our town. We have some amazing small businesses. And when I hear something closes down, it kills me. And when you find out why, it's because they don't have anybody to work there.
Right.
So,
Ryan,
how do we get these guys here and girls? How do we get these folks here?
It starts with affordable housing. Well, let me stop. It starts with lower taxes and less regulatory burden, so that businesses can keep more of their money to invest in their employees, right? And not having to go through significant expensive hoops. And I'm not talking about anything that compromises the environment. I mean, we all moved here because of the environment. The last thing that I would ever promote, and in some circles, I have people that say, you're not even a real Republican because you talk so much about the environment. The fact is, we all moved here in this part of the world because of the incredible, unique assets that we have. I oppose the offshore drilling. I mean, again, tourism, retirees, nobody's going to move here if all we got is dirty air, dirty water, and unclean rivers and estuaries. That's just not going to happen. So protecting our natural assets, number one. But your question was, it's about affordable housing. And, ultimately, we've got to continue to work at finding a way to provide housing opportunities so that we don't have, as we once did, 20,000+ people getting on buses and cars for more than an hour and a half and driving over the Hilton Head Bridge every day to go to work. But that is really challenging and difficult because of how expensive land is. One of the things that we continue to do, and at the state level, what we can do, we can continue to support the tax credit for the housing programs, the state housing trust. We can continue to put money in those so that that there is the opportunity to work through tax credits and other incentives to be able to have affordable housing. Again, the difficulty is land is expensive, land's difficult to find, and because of the nature of the scorecards with the housing folks, those scorecards typically look at an area based on access from that affordable housing to distance, proximity to schools and grocery stores and restaurants. Well, when you put water in the mix, it's not as the crow flies, right? So, I
Mhm.
mean, you start talking about road distance to get to some of the places, it disqualifies a lot of land
Yeah.
because there's so much. And so we continue to try to get the scorecards to be changed rather than what works maybe for the rest of the world, that it doesn't have their back up against the beautiful marshes and rivers and streams that we have in so much water, to try to work in with that. Bill
Now, are these
Herkersman.
scorecards like a metaphorical scorecard, or is there an actual
No, there's an
scorecard?
actual there is an actual scoring sheet for for affordable housing projects that talks
Hmm.
about you got to be within so many distance of a pharmacy, so much distance of schools, so many distance of whether it's bus stops or other mass transit, so far from a grocery store. Well, overlay that into our district, into our part of South Carolina, and you say, well, wait a minute, that creates that's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's not, but it is something that at the state level we continue to talk about how important and how necessary it is. I know at the local level during my entire tenure at county council that their efforts, they're not enormous efforts, but there are incremental efforts. Hilton Head has done some recent activity. At the state level, we've talked about and authorized local governments to be able to include density bonuses for affordable housing, not mandates, but bonuses. If normally you can build 4 units per the acre, but now you're going to make so many of the units affordable, you might get a 25% increase in density, so that now you get to build more on the land because you've put in affordable housing. So,
Wow.
I mean, to answer your question, look, I've got a couple of people that work for me here in the firm. They drive more than an hour and a half to get here to work because of the very reason you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's a problem that I'm acutely aware of, just like you, both in my personal life as well as in my public service life. And I wish I could tell you that there was a silver bullet.
Right.
But if we can reduce the cost on business, we can reduce the cost on families, working families with lower income taxes, then they have more money to afford housing, and we continue to try to find solutions to affordable housing.
So now, it's almost the converse of this whole conversation. The infrastructure, specifically the roads, we have so many people here, none of which seem to be working for us, I guess. Everybody, a lot of visitors, a lot of retirees. I get it. But how do we make the roads safer? What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, first, it's not by safer. I don't know that you mean capacity, bigger infrastructure, more infrastructure, in better condition, or you mean law enforcement presence and
I mean, less cars getting banged up that I see on Facebook, the better. How do we get there?
yeah,
There's just so many bad accidents, right? Like, it's very unsafe. It's absolutely wild. I honestly, and I'm not joking, I stress when my fiance leaves to go drop my son off at school. I'd rather be the one that does it. It's because I know I'm doing it, right? Like, I don't want the stress of worrying about them. There's just always something crazy going on. So it could be the police presence. It could be more lights. It could be wider roadways. What have you worked on? What are you working on? And what's your viewpoint on it?
Ryan, this is something that my entire tenure in public service is involved. And let me tell you, so when I first got elected to county council, you heard me talking a minute ago about we weren't on state needs list for 278. So I started going back and forth to Washington back then. I had worked for Strom Thurmond when I was in college. And again, looked around at what happens in other parts of the state because of living all over the state. But we went there, and ultimately, for about a year, I forwarded to Washington the everyday accident reports from Highway 278, the statistics of how many property damage accidents and personal injury, to get the attention of our guys in Washington. Ultimately, we ended up getting a federal earmark of about $90 million to widen 278. Now, in today's dollars, that doesn't sound like a lot, but this is back in the early 2000s. 278 was a 2-lane road. The state didn't have it on a list for anything to happen in 25 years. And so, Beaufort County had the first penny sales tax for the widening of 170. we passed the impact fee at the local level. I mean, Beaufort County did a lot on its own in conjunction with the municipalities. And now, with the strength of our delegation, as I've mentioned, we're out kicking our coverage or punching above our weight in terms of the amount of state dollars coming back here for our roads and bridges. And we're going to continue to do that. We are going to continue if there's a discussion at the State Infrastructure Bank. The money that we got for the Hilton Head Bridge was more than the rest of the projects that were in there vying for it as well. You know, our job is to make the case. We got an economic engine in Beaufort County. Tourism, one of the top industries in the state. We're one of the leaders in the tourism, Charleston, Hilton Head area, and Myrtle Beach. We got one road in and one road out that we're dependent on. The state needs to pay attention, not treat Beaufort County as a donor county, but recognize that state investments here are appropriate. And we've successfully made that case as part of the strength of our delegation in getting resources back here. So the short answer to your question, roads that are service level F and failing, we got to make sure we got enough law enforcement presence, both state and local, that are out there to try to maintain the rules of the road, if you will, and to try to keep people safe. But safe roads are also tied to capacity. Beaufort County's secret is out. I mean, our roadways are busting at the seams. And the continuation and the need to support our infrastructure is one of the top priorities that is recognized in Columbia. Look, I was part of the group early in my tenure in the House, and because of my experience on county council, that was put on the ad hoc committee in the House to look at the gas tax that wasn't indexed to inflation and hadn't been adjusted since the 80s. And I voted for the increase in gas tax, not because I wanted to, but at that period in time, we did not have budget surpluses of significance. We did not have extra money, and we had a failing road network in the state that had been ignored for 30 years. The fact that DOT had a tire replacement fund was an embarrassment to me. That DOT, rather than spending the money fixing the damn roads, had a fund that if you blew a wheel out, you could send your bill to DOT and they'd buy you a new tire.
Wow. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah. And so, you know, but look, here's the backdrop. South Carolina's got about 63,000 road miles in South Carolina under its ownership. Or total. About 2/3 of that, 60%, are state roads. Okay, so 63,000 miles over the state, 41 that are in state responsibility. You know, that by comparison, most states are responsible for less than 20% of their roads. So we got 3 times that here in South Carolina. And, you know, we've got roads that are, I live on one. It's a dead end road. Right? I mean, why and how did it ever become a state road? It's not a farm to market road. It's no significance to statewide industry. It was the way that South Carolina came up when the legislature approved local county budgets. So we've empowered our county transportation committee here. Every year we've been pulling extra money in the budget and sending down to the CTCs so that the locals have more money to make local decisions on the roads. It's a committee that we turned over the appointment authority to county council from the delegation so that they can prioritize and make decisions, whether it's repaving, resurfacing roads, whether it's paving dirt roads that people can't get down or EMS and fire trucks can't get down. And we've continued to increase the funding that goes to them, as well as giving more money to DOT so that they're able to take advantage of the problems that other states have been having and leverage more federal dollars. When the feds have a matching program that's not fully subscribed, we've made sure we filled the coffers at DOT in excess of what they're already getting, again, because we ignored the roads for 30 years. I mean, 95 and 26 are the lifelines, quite frankly, for evacuation, among other things. So not only is it the day-to-day safety, it's as these storms are coming up and coming up quicker, and when there is an evacuation that gets ordered, if the time does not afford to get people out of harm's way because the infrastructure won't support it, then that's a real problem. And as we have talked about in this part of the world for as long as I've been involved in public service, you evacuate too early, you kill business because nobody's coming back with a midweek interrupted vacation. You evacuate too late, you put people in harm's way. And, contraflow of the lanes going in and out of Hilton Head is part of an evacuation plan. That's difficult to man. It's difficult to monitor because you got buses coming in from Charlotte to pick up people in nursing homes. You got hospital that takes people out by the airport. So it's a massive undertaking when you start talking about evacuation. And if your roads are choke points well inland from here, then quite frankly, we've not delivered the level of service and have the public safety interests at mind that are necessary to protect the economic growth and viability of people here. Nobody's going to move here if you can't get out of harm's way.
Exactly.
So it's not just the day-to-day issue with the roads; it's the longer play and longer term as well.
So you're saying you could probably figure out how to fix it by tomorrow?
I wish. I've been dealing with this since 1999. But look, from where we were then to where we are today, great progress. And what I have encouraged my friends now, the mayors of all the municipalities, as well as the chairman of county council, don't make the mistake that was made in the early 90s in Beaufort, where there was a disconnect between the county and the municipalities about where and what the development would look like. Because that kind of disconnection leads to increased costs to the citizens, and it presents challenges that government hadn't collectively planned for. And it has been a theme that I have preached to them. Beaufort's original comprehensive plan was described as being a not so comprehensive plan that was required by state law because all the mayors said we had no input. And we weren't invited to the table. We weren't part of the discussion. We don't have any idea how this treats our area. We went through those growing pains in Beaufort. Jasper's experiencing some of that now, and they're the entryway to the Low Country. And to the greatest extent that we can, we need to be cooperating. And I say we at the local level, but I represent part of Jasper County as well. So my job is to make sure that I'm encouraging the mayors in the cities in Beaufort County and the cities in Jasper County and the county councils of those to work together and to make sure we're dialed in to what they're doing so that we know what they need from us in Columbia.
Well, it sounds like from, to take this conversation all the way to the beginning, we have a pretty solid powerhouse of representation that you mentioned, going from, talking to our local municipal level and bringing it to the state level. And I appreciate that because I feel like we need to be properly represented and heard because to your point, again, all the way back to the beginning, seeing how different leadership from different areas all of a sudden starts getting attention, it makes me after this conversation, a lot happier to know that we got the right folks in place making enough noise to represent us to get the right attention. So I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
I do have one more bonus question for you. As you can see, I wear this hoodie very proud, almost every day, allowable weather-wise, built with integrity. It's our tagline here at Bluffton Builders. I started it just because I thought it was cool. My dad started the company. He is a man of integrity, but we also build some really solid structures with integrity. But then all of a sudden I started living my life through this filter. How does Weston Newton feel that he is built with integrity?
So a couple of things, my political philosophy, and let me just tell you that, is based on, sort of the foundation of values that I was taught as a young child. Hard work, personal responsibility, love of God, devotion of family, working, quite frankly, to make government as inconsequential as possible, and with the highest level of ethics and integrity that I possibly can. My tenure in the State House shows that I served on the Ethics Reform Task Force. I served on, because again, it goes back to my fundamental belief the people's business ought to be done in public. I got a track record of being a consensus builder and working with everybody to get major accomplishments done. But part of that is, you see, my reputation is in Columbia, you see what you get. I'm going to work as hard as I can possibly work. I'm going to be an open book the way that I do it. I have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. That's to listen more than I speak. And that at the end of the day, it's more important to me to vote after thoughtful deliberation and to come home and look myself in the mirror and know that I've done the best that I can to make things better for my children and their children than anything else that motivates or drives me. So ethics, integrity, good faith, commitment, public transparency, and accountability, I think those all go hand in hand. And that, quite frankly, that ought to be the standard for all our elected officials.
I agree. And I appreciate your time, Weston. I also appreciate the Greater Bluffton Chamber of Commerce for allowing me to do this and helping get everybody scheduled. Weston, again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time, and best of luck to you, sir.
Ryan, pleasure. I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks very much.
You too, Weston.
You know, in closing, I just would say that I hope I have the opportunity to continue to represent the folks in District 120 and would humbly ask for your vote and their vote.
Perfect. Thank you, Weston. Take care. Have a great one.